Hello everybody and welcome to this, the latest edition of the Rewatch Project with Hannah and Mike. I am Mike and with me as always is Hannah. How are you this evening, Hannah?
Do we go there? Well, I've been in hospital.
Yeah, let's just stop there. She's not in hospital anymore. She's been ill. Yada, yada.
Excuse me. I will summarise. Autoimmune diseases suck. Be careful what you put in your bodies. And anyone who is able to give blood should do so because it comes in very handy when you need transfusions.
Excellent. Public service announcement over?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, but we are back. We are both alive. We are very appreciative of the New Zealand health system. And we are ready for the summer.
We are ready for the good times. Good times.
Yeah, I assume that's a song from what we're covering this evening.
Yeah,
I have little to no knowledge of.
Are you ready for the summer?
Well, why don't you tell our listeners what we're talking about tonight, huh? And why we're talking about it?
We are talking about the 1979 classic Meatballs, starring your friend of mine, Bill Murray. It is directed by Ivan Reitman and written by Len Blum, Daniel Goldberg, Janice Allen, and Harold Ramis.
So that's okay.
And we're doing it because we have finished our last rewatch proper, which was Twin Peaks. We are now doing what we call our sorbet episodes, which are a palate cleanser before we start our next thing. And the theme for this time's palate cleansers is summer versus winter. Because Mike grew up with a winter December time and I grew up with a summer December time. So Mike will be choosing something wintry for us to watch next time on the podcast. I chose this movie because I love it. It's such a comfort watch for me. And it invokes all those things that I think about with summer in terms of it being very much outside. There's a lot of camping involved. There's a lot of making friends with random strange kids and ending up having just a blast with them for 6 weeks and then never seeing them again ever. It's what I associate with this time of year. December, January is prime. Get out into the campsites, slap yourself with sunscreen.
Pop your clothes on the chair.
Let the good times roll. Lots of barbecues, lots of swimming, lots of kayaking, canoeing, going in boats, water skiing, anything you want. That's summer. And that's what I've grown up with. So, and I mean, it's not set in New Zealand. It's not supposed to be, but it's got that feel of camping and the glorious outdoors.
Great outdoors.
So that's what we're going with.
Okay, I've got absolutely no connection with this film at all, which is weird because everything about it, from the fact that it's... I'm a big fan of a lot of the people involved in this film. Obviously, I like Bill Murray. I like Harold Ramis. I like Ivan Reitman. Some of my favourite films from my youth were Stripes, which was written by Harold Ramis and directed by Ivan Reitman. It was the film they did straight after this starred Bill Murray. Obviously, I love Ghostbusters. I love the National Lampoon's movies.
Animal House.
Animal House is probably my favourite comedy film of all time.
Animal House is an absolute classic of a chin stroker versus punter episode.
Yeah. And it also, written by Harold Ramis. That was directed by John Landis, though. But John Landis and Ivan Reitman. I mean, if you think about all those films that are made around this time, you've got Ghostbusters, you've got National Lampoon's Vacation, Animal House, Stripes. God, there are others as well that I can't believe that I'm forgetting. But the Blues Brothers, I kind of count as being part of that. And it was a collection of...
I believe it was the Blues Brothers that stopped. That's John Landis, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think that's why he's not directing this. It's because he was directing the Blues Brothers.
I'd thought Landis had directed this actually, and when I looked, I was like, oh, it's Reitman. So it feels that Reitman and John Landis were kind of interchangeable at this point. Although as much as I love Ivan Reitman, and I think John Landis is a better filmmaker.
I sort of see them as a little bit of a Spielberg-Lucas team.
Yeah, well, it's that's what the whole National Lampoon thing was. National Lampoon was almost like the American Monty Python. You know, it was like a collection of creative people, of actors, writers, and some of them did multiple things as well. Obviously, Ramis was a writer and an actor as well. So it's odd that I've not got a connection. Also, I loved a lot of the holiday camp set movies of the era, whether it be the slasher movies, but also the bawdy comedy type movies, your Porky's type films and stuff. And this was a movie that I always remember. I remember the video cover for it. So it's odd that I'd never seen it. So I don't have any real nostalgia for it. And also I didn't have the same kind of, you know, I grew up in a city in the Midlands in England, you know, so I didn't really have the summer. I mean, summers for me growing up were sweating, eating ice lollies in the garden with my feet in a paddling pool, you know, and a week. I mean, if anything, my summer experience was probably closer to what you see at Kellerman's in Dirty Dancing, but minus the sexy dancing. Well, actually, I was maybe a little bit of sexy dancing. I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but I do remember throwing shapes to The Only Way Is Up by Yaz and the Plastic Population back in '87.
It's an absolute beggar of a tune. Hold on, hold on, hold on.
So, but this sort of environment of, I mean, I know I've subsequently, as an adult, been to the parts of New Zealand that Hannah went to when you were young. So I can see why you would have that connection. But I've seen this film once, and this was with you, but that's going back, you know, a decade and a half, and I barely remember it. You know, I think we probably watched After the Pub one night or something, and you know, so I don't really
much alcohol would have been imbibed.
Yeah, so I've got and I'll be honest, I don't remember being terribly impressed with it, but at the same time,
it's not a stone cold classic.
It's a hangout movie.
It's very much for me, it's the type of film that you either connect with or you don't.
It catches a vibe, you know. But I'm looking forward to watching it. And like I say, for me, there's enough interest in the era and the type of filmmaking. So quick reminder that we appreciate feedback. Rewatchprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Please do check out all of the other film, television, music, and other assorted pop cultural goodness on our YouTube channel as well. And do feel free to leave comments there as well. Also check out our friend shows, namely Chinstroker versus Punter, his film, her movie, Film Bastards, Entertainment Landfill, The Good, the Bad and the Odd, and Talk Without Rhythm podcast. And also positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify are very much appreciated. We're also on Instagram, where we are at rewatchproj, and also on Blue Sky at Chinstroker. Last but not least, quick reminder that we do have a PayPal link. So if you want to contribute to the show, please feel free to do so, but only if you can do so without it causing you any financial hardship. All of the content will continue to be free. That won't change. But if you can, we're not going to say no. Should we hit pause, watch the movie?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be back in 90 minutes of our time and probably 40 seconds of yours. So back shortly.
Are you ready for the summer? Are you ready for the sunshine?
And we are back. So we've just finished watching 1979's Meatballs. Hannah, I say initial thoughts, but you have seen this film many times, judging by how well you knew the lyrics of the 3 songs that were endlessly repeated in this film. What are your initial thoughts before we break it down?
I enjoyed it just as much. It's just a film that is like a great big warm hug for me. I love all the obvious riffing that Bill Murray does in it. The only bit I don't like is when he kind of sexually assaults Roxanne. Yeah, but like it's funny and it's sweet and it's very of the time, people getting, openly shitty in front of kids about them not scoring a goal and stuff. It's very 70s and 80s. I just love it. I know that it's not the best film in the world, and I know most people probably don't like it, but for me, this is quintessential summertime vibes. It is going like I so many camping holidays I had where you see the same families and you have these weird relationships with the kids where you see them.
They're very close and intense for very short periods of time, aren't
you
they?
see them for like a few weeks of the year, but you might see them every year for 5 years.
Yeah.
But only for 2 weeks, and you won't have talked to each other for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But you kind of just pick up where you left off,
yeah.
and it's amazing.
But also because you're away from home and you're away from your normal life, you can kind of not reinvent yourself, but it's a different world.
Yeah, it is. And also like the parent day bit in it where they like, apparently that is real footage from the camp that was going on when they were shooting. It reminded me of going to see my sister when she went to the Girl Guide Jamboree and trying to find her in these thousands of girls and, seeing all the things that she'd got up to and how exciting it was. Yeah, it was just, every time I watch it, I just feel like, what a cool experience that was for all of them. And, the whole sort of story of Rudy not really knowing how to find his place and not being a quintessential popular kid and finding a connection with Tripper is kind of, it's really gorgeous how Trip kind of looks after him and helps him to flourish and find himself, and I just love it. And I have also started a car journey like Bill Murray ended it on that motorbike before. That is my vibe, isn't it? Very loud singing and over the top hollering at whoever's around me, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I am 2 thumbs up. I would give it for feel good factor and how I feel after I've watched it. I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5.
Nice.
What say you?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because it's a kind of filmmaking that just doesn't exist anymore. It's very much of a time when filmmakers would just point the camera and film and largely let the films coast on personalities.
Yeah.
And this film feels very much like a vehicle for Bill Murray.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, I mean, I like I say, I don't have any of the cultural touchstones for this film from the perspective of I never went on holiday camp or summer camp or anything like that. And even if I did, this is a very American thing. And also the other cultural touch point I've never had was Saturday Night Live. That was never a thing in the UK. It still isn't really, apart from what you see on YouTube.
No, same in New Zealand.
It never really made it over to the UK as far as I know. So I think that a lot of this, presumably, I mean, I know so little about Saturday Night Live that I might even be getting the chronology wrong, but I assume...
Well, they're all Canadian in this.
Yeah, but there was a lot of the boots, wasn't there? But I know I would assume that Bill Murray was fairly well known from Saturday Night Live, and this was an early film for him to go out and kind of do his thing,
Yeah.
So, just the idea of just letting the camera roll whilst Bill Murray does his thing. And you're right about it being improvisational, like scenes where he's just going. Like I think particularly the...
It Just Doesn't Matter.
the way that everyone in that scene's reacting to him is they feel like an audience.
Yeah.
Like that you can tell that their amusement is genuine.
Yeah.
And that he's just going.
He's just been told to rile them up.
Just be Bill Murray.
Go for it. Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for people to forget how influential the Bill Murray type persona was throughout all of the 80s. You wouldn't have had Bruce Willis, if you think about Bruce Willis in Moonlighting and that kind of wise-ass humour that he's got. And you saw it a lot in a lot of other people in the era who kind of stole Bill Murray's shtick. You think about like Steve Guttenberg in the Police Academy movies, and even,
I think though, the thing Bill Murray has for me in this movie that perhaps like maybe wouldn't be a Steve Guttenberg thing is he does not care if he looks the fool. Like he's like,
there's no vanity.
No, and it comes across in that message he's giving of it just doesn't matter if we win or
well,
lose.
the thing about Bill Murray,
and who cares if you don't make the goal in the football game?
Well, but Bill Murray characters, and I'm talking about like classic era Bill Murray, like pre Wes Anderson,
like
Bill
Ghostbusters
Murray.
and stuff.
And Stripes and all of those. His whole thing was his character always punched above his weight, and.
Well, there was no sort of glass ceiling for him. He kind of just went for what he was into.
The reason why Bill Murray resonated so much with audiences is that there was nothing special about him. His whole thing was, the lack of vanity made it appealing, because he just didn't give a shit.
Well, it's confidence, isn't it? It's super attractive.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways, that is a very inspirational thing. The idea of being able to go through life being so carefree is a tremendously appealing idea. And I think that's one of the reasons why characters like Bruce Willis's Die Hard character resonated so much with audiences, was because of the relatability of them.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's really interesting about this film...
I think about Bruce Willis every time I'm crawling through an air vent.
Every time I'm walking over broken glass. Yeah. Is that every time I'm wearing a vest. But the other thing as well is the because on the one hand, you could look at this film with modern eyes and roll your eyes at it. You talk about, the fat shaming and the characters calling each other home and all the things that, comedy is the genre that it's the easiest to go back with modern eyes and be critical of, because the whole thing about comedy is based on saying unexpected things. And generally, unexpected things are off colour. So that doesn't age well. But I kind of just hand wave that because this is...
I think you have to.
Yeah, this is like 40 years, nearly 50 years ago. So, yeah, it is what it is, okay? But pushing that aside, the other thing about this film that I think is interesting they don't make them like this anymore, is there's kind of an innocence to it. I don't think that there's anything cynical about it.
No.
It feels that, like it or loathe it, it does feel like it's kind of coming from a place of purity. And the thing that I think is really interesting, and the thing that I enjoyed about watching it this time, I think because when I first watched it, I had a completely false idea of what it was. I thought it was like Porky's or Revenge of the Nerds. I thought that it was an R-rated, bawdy, and there's elements of that.
Yeah, but there's no like overt
it's a PG-13. There's no like F-bombs or nudity or anything too transgressive outside of the elements of it that haven't aged well from a sort of social, justice perspective. But in a lot of ways, it is a really innocent kind of filmmaking that I just don't think can exist anymore now, because we are a much more media savvy, cynical audience. So it is interesting seeing a film made then, but also the hangout factor. This film doesn't have a story.
No.
I mean, at the end, you're like, oh, okay, it's all been leading up to the competition. But that's not really a through line in the film.
It's a group of kids went to summer camp.
But basically what this film, and I'm not saying this critically, because it's quite refreshing, it's quite nice. I like hangout movies where that's the case, is there's no goal.
No.
There's nothing that the characters are narratively striving towards in this film. But I think that although I don't have all those cultural touchstones, the thing that I kind of admire about this film, and I can't quite put my finger on it because I lack those cultural touchstones, is it does feel like it captures something. It might be a time or an era or a feeling or a way of being, but it does feel like one of those movies that captures something, you know. But it also has that freewheeling feeling that a lot of films like the British Carry On movies had.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of, I guess what I'm driving at is something that doesn't happen anymore is films existing just for the sake of existing.
Yeah.
You know, a film being made just because they wanted to make that film, that does not happen.
I just love how there's so little drama around the kind of hooking up of various couples and stuff. Like it's just it's so teenage and like, right, it's the start of the summer. Who do I fancy the most? Right, you're going to be my boyfriend for the summer. You see it with all the CITs, like working out who they're going to be with.
And I did get confused though, because this film does what all films do, where it has people playing characters who are younger than them. There were points where I wasn't quite sure where the lines of division were. With I'm like, are they meant to be one of the more grown up ones, or are they one of the kids? There was like a little bit of that, because I don't know. I mean, you're using abbreviations that I don't know. So I'm there were moments where I'm like, are they kids? Are they meant to be kids?
The CITs, the counsellors in training, I would assume that they are around the 17, 18 years of age.
Yeah. And then you've got the kids.
Yeah.
And then you've got the grown-ups.
Yeah.
But again, because of the weird casting logic that you get in films, it's not necessarily, apart from when characters are verbally saying this stuff, it's not that sort of obvious.
I mean, I've never been to, obviously, your traditional American or Canadian summer camp, like without my parents for a set amount of time, you know, staying in cabins and whatever. Like every camp I've been to. I don't think
our kids would handle that, would they?
Fuck no. Every camping trip I've been on has been with my family. Yeah. But I suppose the difference, like when you go camping with your family at summer in New Zealand, what kids generally find is that their parents are way more lax, and this might be an 80s thing.
Yeah. You're allowed to roam.
I don't know what it's like now, but we just used to be out for the day. Yeah. Like we'd come back if we were hungry. It was the same for us. And that was it. You know, it was just kind of, you know, you'd spend the whole day swimming and playing with your friends and walking up and down the tracks around where your campsite was, you know, just hanging out. And basically annoying your parents as little as possible while they sat on sun lounges and read books and swam and went fishing. That is basically what camping was. Yeah.
Got a few notes, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
So I won't do a beat by beat because, like I say, it's not really sort of narrative film in that regard. But there's a few things I did notice.
It's quite funny watching something very straightforward after watching Twin Peaks.
Yeah. I mean, we've got also a lot of those cliches here that were kind of really early examples. You know, you've got the sellotape in the glasses for the geek. You know.
Who's called Spaz.
Yeah. It's funny as well, like I mentioned Bill Murray, you know, his likability. Because Bill Murray, he's a Chicago guy, and he was part of the Second City comedy troupe, who are an improvisational group. And that's what Todd Stashwick, who I interviewed, who was in Star Trek Picard, that's what he came out of. He was in the Second City comedy troupe as well. And he was like all Chicago actors idolize Bill Murray. He's like a local kind of hero, and so many people got into acting because of just thinking Bill Murray was cool, and that was the thing. Everybody wanted to be him. I mean, I remember, in the mid-'80s, like with Ghostbusters, me and all my friends just seeing Venkman and just. I mean, what you see as an adult, and he's kind of a pathetic figure in some ways,
The flowers are still standing.
But it's just, and that way of talking,
Yeah.
And that was something. I mean, you hear that in Bruce Willis. It's very much that kind of, and all the things that you think of with the T-shirt with the suit jacket over it, the uniform of the party guy. It's just all of these things.
Hawaiian shirt and little red shorts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that all comes from Bill Murray, And I mean, even in the 90s, you'd see that in people like Jason Lee and the Kevin Smith movies, and even like people like Ryan Reynolds to a certain extent, I think bring a similar kind of energy.
Yeah.
That you can kind of trace back to that. I like the fact that the film spends time with each of the groups. Of the age groups, and one of the things that I think it really captures, which I think anyone can relate to, regardless of whether you went on summer camp or English, American, Kiwi, whatever, is it really captures the kind of beautiful but frightening mystery of adolescence.
Yeah,
how I remember at school. And I was the youngest, because of the way that school works in the UK. I was the youngest in my year. And, when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, a few months
it makes a huge
can make a really big difference. So I was really naive. And I remember when I was at school and all the girls were in the classroom, were asked to leave the classroom. And looking back on it, they were obviously being taken somewhere to have the talk. I remember there being rumours about what it was about and just... And you'd learn, well, at least I did, you learn so much about sexuality through whispers and rumours and distortions. And because, parents, at least my parents in the 70s and 80s, they didn't talk to their kids about this stuff. And it was taught in school in such a kind of biological, unemotional...
Mine did.
Yeah.
Mine bought that What's Happening to Me book.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently I was obsessed with.
Yeah, there's exactly. And... the bit where the boys are watching the girls, and it's almost like it's not even shown as being like a pervy trying to see them naked. It's as much they just want a glimpse into that world.
They want to know what girls are sort of getting up to. Yeah.
And when you see what the girls talking about, and I remember, it's to me that resonated. It felt that
when they're all talking about, Lisa finally got her period.
Yeah.
Like I have had that kind of chat with my friends at sort of that 13, 14 years.
Yeah,
of age.
like you can almost smell the hormones, you know, and I feel like that element of the film really effectively. And that's the word I keep coming back to is, and this is something that I love about film, because you can watch this now. I think a lot of modern audiences watch this film now and just go, this is just dumb. Nothing happens. It's really silly. Some of the comedy works, some of it doesn't. It's throwing everything at the wall. But I love that. That gives it a kind of freewheeling quality that results in, and this is the word I'm going to keep using, capturing something. I think sometimes if you want to capture a feeling, you have to just hang with the characters for a while. And I feel like by the end of the film, you feel like you really know the characters and you really believe in their group dynamic.
Yeah.
But not through any of the usual techniques that a film would do that by kind of manipulating you. It's just because you spent 2 hours with them. And the fact that not anything really happens actually kind of helps that.
Well, it's very much like camp.
Yeah.
It's a collection of short experiences all bundled together. Like, you fall off a water ski, someone puts a pants up flagpole, you all have food together, someone tells some gossip, you sit around a campfire and sing some songs. Like, all of those things happen.
Yeah.
But there's no sort of like you say, there's no like climax or story to like. Okay, they have the Olympiad, but you know, it's just another thing.
Well,
you
although
know?
this film was made and came out in the late 70s, in many ways it feels like an early 70s film
Yeah.
in the sense that obviously Star Wars came out in 77 and ushered in the slick, modern blockbuster era. But it really took a few years for that to settle in.
Mm.
So to me, and this is going to sound like a ridiculous comparison, but this feels more akin to that kind of non-narrative, freewheeling, early 70s, late 60s, early 70s cinema of things like Easy Rider and films like that where you did just follow characters for a while and it kind of breathed and there wasn't a feeling that there was a need for the film to have an engine.
Yeah.
In order to keep you...
I mean, let's be honest, if Bill Murray wasn't in this film, it wouldn't be worth watching.
No, but if Bill Murray wasn't in this film, they wouldn't have made it the way that they had.
No.
Because they knew
it's built around him.
that they had Bill Murray. So they basically just created a vehicle. They just gave him space to do his thing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think is in the don't make them like this anymore. Because you still get films that are vehicles for people, but they're much more a pre-existing narrative. A great example of that, I think one of the all-time great vehicle films is Beverly Hills Cop. But that was written for Sylvester Stallone and was going to be an action film.
Absolutely bananas.
And then Eddie Murphy just blew up after Trading Places and again Saturday Night Live, and they were like, we need to get, what is there going? And they were like, well, we've got this script here. And they're like, okay, well, let's just redraft it as a comedy and put him in that. So that's a different way of doing it. That's a shoehorn in this person, but it worked. It worked with Beverly Hills Cop. But in the 70s, it was done differently. It was like, okay, well, let's just put a camera on that person for 2 hours and just get them to do the thing that they did on Saturday Night Live that people liked, and we'll just let's have him at a summer camp.
I mean, he's got charisma. You can't get away from it.
I find it hard to believe that Bill Murray ever jogged.
Yeah.
Like, have you noticed how there's never a shot longer than about 5 or 6 seconds of him jogging without the angle changing? I can imagine him just stopping and like coughing his guts out. And but it did make me want to watch Animal House, although obviously Bill Murray's not in that, and Stripes. It did make me think, I'd like to watch a few more of these films from this era.
Yeah.
Another thing that this felt like it was coming out of a little bit, and this is going to sound like a really odd comparison initially, but it felt like it was also slightly influenced by the popularity of MASH.
Yeah.
Like the whole jokey anti-authoritarian.
Like Alan Alda sipping a gin martini.
And all the stuff with Morty.
Yeah.
It just feels very of a piece with that.
Yeah,
and the
I get
TV
that.
series MASH was very popular around this time as well. It was probably peaking in popularity around this point. And it felt like...
I think they probably had an almost identical outfit that Hawkeye wears.
Yeah. And I just think that there was that kind of comedic anti-authoritarianism was just a kind of zeitgeisty thing at the time.
The character that jokes and fools around all the time, but really does have a sensitive, sweet side to them.
I mean, I think we all want to go through life like a circa 1979 to 1985 Bill Murray. I think we'd be very happy.
Yeah.
If we were a little bit less rapey, but I love the florid acoustic music during any of the kind of autumn light.
I'm ready for the moonlight.
But it's like, I can imagine an album of music. Like, do you remember all those albums that came in the 70s and they all had that very florid font on the covers, and it would be some guy in a turtleneck with an acoustic guitar or some panpipes or something. The again, the Mohawks, the cultural sensitivity with their war dance thing that they're doing.
Oh, no, terrible.
You know.
Terrible.
I've got the note about the suit jacket and t-shirt party guy outfit here. And like all good hangout movies, it grows on you as you're watching it.
Yeah.
Because for about the first 20 minutes of it, I just thought, oh God, this is going to be a long 90 minutes. But about halfway through it, I was like, I'm enjoying this. But that's how hangout movies work.
Yeah.
Because until you've actually hung out with them for a while,
Yeah.
the film can't do its thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You've got to kind of...
To start with, I was thinking, oh, he's not going to like my pick.
Oh, no, but the thing is, I can find something interesting in everything. I could take a kind of a scientific approach to it, but I did enjoy it, so I didn't have to do that. But there's some great disco music as well, and
I'm making it. I think it's from a TV show. I'm pretty sure it says on
a lot of the music in this reminded me of TV show music, like almost like sitcom themes kind of thing. I'll tell you another thing that from the era that I feel like there was a bit of a stylistic similarity with, and I say this because I watched a documentary about him recently, was a lot of the kind of nonsense comedy that Bill Murray does. You know, where he's just going off and he's just talking absolute gibberish, but he's just doing it in a way that's just so likeable. It reminds me of Steve Martin's stand-up. You know, like the wild and crazy guy and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
It feels very contemporary to that.
Very much so.
And I think that there was something in the mid to late 70s that people just liked about, 30-year-old guys just being zany.
Yeah.
It was just a popular thing.
Can I read you this trivia bit from IMDb?
Sure.
While filming the social dance scene that happens after the basketball game, the cast wasn't actually dancing to Making It by David Norton, the song that was inserted in post-production after permission for its use was secured. They're actually dancing to Miss You by the Rolling Stones.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it was played...
That's how it goes.
Oh, okay.
Lord, I miss you.
Well, there you go. That's what they were dancing to.
That makes sense. We get the spooky stories around the campfire, of course.
I love that, how he has the little hook in his hand.
I also like how happy for him Spazzy's friend is when he tells her that he holds her hand. Because in any other movie, he'd give him shit about that. But I think it speaks to the kind of disarming sweetness. And I think that the films that this would go on to influence, because this was very early. This was before Caddyshack, I think.
I think
and Caddyshack really was the breakout film for Bill Murray internationally. I think that's the difference. I think Saturday Night Live still is to a certain extent, but certainly in the 70s, was just a North American thing. So I think international or European audiences and Australasian, I guess, audiences didn't really know him until that. And Bill Murray's career, it took a few films, because Stripes did quite well, but really it was Ghostbusters.
It was Ghostbusters, yeah.
That, and he was, he must have been in his mid-30s.
Ghostbusters, Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Scrooged, that whole run of films that he did.
I remember going to see What About Bob?
Yeah.
At the cinema.
Well, it was like, the kings of kind of light comedy in the 80s. You had Eddie Murphy, obviously, but you had Guttenberg as well, and Bill Murray, but Michael J. Fox and Tom Hanks as well.
Yeah.
Pre-serious actor Tom Hanks.
Big.
Yeah. All of those films were they were kind of the
Joe versus the Volcano.
Yeah,
classic.
They were the sort of the Mount Rushmore of like family comedy.
Yeah.
The inspirational speech that he makes as well is great, but again, it's so of that sort of era. Like it really reminds me of the Animal House. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Kind of speech. It's very much. There was all of these films, whether it's Stripes, Animal House, this Ghostbusters. They all have a call to arms sequence, and I think it's just because the comedians of that time were really good at rabble-rousey kind of, because they did come from Saturday Night Live where you had to work a crowd.
Yeah, absolutely.
And America, the whole.
And they know how to improvise.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, a lot of it is, and the thing I think when you watch people like Bill Murray, and I think even like people like Chevy Chase and John Belushi as well. It's not about and James Belushi as well. If you look at the film like Canine, the things, a lot of the stuff he did had that kind of Bill Murray energy to it as well. But the pleasure of watching those actors isn't even necessarily that they're funny. You're not sitting there like laughing. It's more just the enjoyment just comes from kind of wanting to be like them.
Yeah.
I think that's it's weird because it's an attainable, aspirational thing. Like, you want to be like them, but because it's Bill Murray, it feels like it's plausible that you could be, and so I think that's probably the appeal, is the fact that you're like, I want to be like that dude, and maybe if I just with a little bit of booze in me, maybe I could be, I would say in a lot of ways it's probably this film, in good and bad ways, the purest distillation of what Bill Murray does.
Yeah. Because
in all of his other films, there's a narrative and there's an element of like, okay, there's a couple of minutes here for you to do a bit of Bill Murray stuff. This is just all that. It is literally just, right, go, be Bill Murray for 90 minutes. So it's the sort of purest version of it. And the cast are essentially an audience. And, it just doesn't matter. It is a great mantra to have as well.
It really is.
Another big element of Bill Murray's comedy is just how little respect for physical boundaries he's got. Like, he's always just grabbing people.
He's totally in their faces.
And just, there's a kind of, it's weird because it's not obnoxious. It's really, it so easily could be. And there's a lot of comedians who do that, and are obnoxious. And being obnoxious is their thing. And the fact that he can do that without it, to me at least, being, maybe I've just, because I've grown up and I've been indoctrinated to the ways of Bill Murray. But it is a really odd tension to be able to walk. But anything else, Hannah? That's my notes.
No, I'm so pleased that we watched it because it made me feel great. And I am ready for the summer.
Meatballs 2 tomorrow night?
No.
Is Bill Murray's not in any of the sequels, I assume?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
I've not seen them. One is perfectly plenty for me.
Well, all right. Well, we will be back very soon. For my pick, we are going to be covering the X-Files episode Ice from season 1 of said show.
Ice,
very unambiguously wintry. I was going to go for the theme, but then I thought, well, this is essentially that, and it's only 45 minutes, so we can get a longer conversation about it. And also, I kind of miss the X-Files. I'm quite looking for an excuse to have a bit of a Mully and Sculder time. Cool. Okay, well, that's us for now, guys. Quick reminder that we do appreciate feedback at rewatchprojectpodcast@gmail.com, or alternatively, just leave comments here on the YouTube channel. Check out our friend shows, reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Very much appreciated, and we will be back very soon. Goodbye.
See ya.
Are you ready for the summer?